Welcome to TacTalk. Appreciate you spending time with us each week. And today we're going to have a conversation really about, I think a lot of us are familiar with firearms and we've been in the community a long time, but we got to keep in mind that others aren't, right? And they haven't always been around it. And I want to have a conversation with somebody, a good friend of ours, Michael Ward's here, about, exactly that, right? Not having grown up around firearms and kind of a path to it. Again, my name is Chris Linville with Vulcan Arms and Guns America. We have Andy Chavaria with us today, also with Vulcan Arms. So, Andy, do you want to share anything before we get started?
Yeah, dude. So like you said, we've been in the industry for a while.
Yep.
We've been around firearms. I kind of grew up hunting and fishing. I was 17 when I enlisted, so it was weapon on me full time since I was 17 years old. So like for me, kind of like you, right? Second nature to have a firearm.
Oh yeah, I grew up I grew up with firearms in a military family, right?
Yep.
And it was always second nature. And I think a lot of people even grew up maybe hunting,
Yeah.
Michael, you didn't have that experience, right?
Not at all.
Yeah.
No, which was odd because a lot of people don't realize. I mean, my dad was a Marine. He did 2 tours in Vietnam.
He was a drill sergeant, right?
He was a drill sergeant. And you would like automatically expect, oh, I'm sure, hunt guns in the house. Mm-hmm. I think we maybe had a BB gun in the house at one point, but never had firearms in the house. Hunting was never, again, another odd thing. Growing up, my dad would train bird dogs for people to go hunt, but
never went hunting.
We never went hunting.
Wow.
I never went hunting. So, didn't really even come into that space and find interest in it until my, early 40s.
So when you were growing up, would you say there was a positive thought about firearms or negative or not really any
or indifferent
at all? Indifferent.
So I was indifferent. I mean, I remember even say 10 years ago, so I'm a chef, and I remember 10 years ago, I was in the kitchen one day and having a very heated conversation with my sous chef about guns. He was very pro-gun, and at the time, my response to it was, I don't own guns. I don't have a gun. I don't have a dog in this fight. Like, whatever you guys want to do is what you want to do.
So not into guns at the time, but not what a lot of people would say super liberal and just like against guns either. You were just indifferent.
Well, so what's interesting is I think that
because you did live in Austin, which is a very liberal place, right?
100%. And what was interesting is that, because as I kind of look at my journey, is that, and it's probably very similar to what a lot of Americans who maybe don't own firearms is, you kind of just take the information that you're given by mainstream media and you're like, okay, that must be the way things are. So, I mean, I know that in those conversations, I would probably repeat a lot of those things until I began to do some of my own research and kind of have some of my own experiences. So
somebody looking from the outside that knew you back then might have thought you were negative gun.
100%. Yeah.
So you thought we were all running around with like fully automatic military style rifles with 4,000 round magazines.
Well, so I'd like to think that I do have more than 2 brain cells to rub together. So
you said what the media puts out there.
100%.
Just going.
I would say more.
Everyone owns an EOTech.
Exactly. I would say more of just I had I probably more of just ascribed to the mentality of what do you need that for?
Right.
So to actually on that, and not to cut you off, is we had a recent conversation with Ron Holmes where he talked about preparedness, and if you count on 911, that's not really a plan.
Nope.
But in a sense, you kind of had that plan back then.
Yeah.
Why do you need it? We have 911, or we have cops, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I mean, to maybe jump ahead or just kind of preview, is that my journey into firearms stemmed from. And I couldn't tell you the time. I know that there were some event horizons, but at some point, probably around the time my daughter was born, where I kind of realized that, personal responsibility, that no one's coming for you.
I'm it.
And when you're a dad, right?
Yeah.
So that there's something weird that happens when you start having kids, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, it's not just me I got to take care of. And so I think somewhere around that time, I started, my mentality and my vision on the world started bending.
Yeah.
But then even then, I think, so your daughter is 9 now.
Yeah.
But you've been kind of into firearms for what, 4 years or so?
No, probably 5 or 6 now.
Okay, 5 or 6. So still, it even took 3 years or so.
Absolutely.
Right? Before once you had her and you started to have this feeling of, I got to protect her and I got to be responsible in that sense, till when you actually jumped in. So what was that actual shift when did you shoot a gun the first time, kind of, and where was that?
So, good question, funny story, is that a couple of my buddies, fraternity brothers, who were into guns. But
so you buy friends too?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
I just
all right.
rent them with the option to buy. That's really what it is.
I didn't do that.
Exactly.
I skipped college. So, you know.
So we
Same.
had every year. So we had this event where all the guys would get together, and it's now become what we call Guys and Guns.
We went this year, actually.
Yes,
It was great.
The first year
I'll
of
tell
it,
a funny
though,
story on that in a second.
The first year, though, a couple of my friends showed up and they asked if they could bring their ARs. Well, I still don't know anything about guns. I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, I don't know if my
And this is
uncle's
on
gonna
your
be-
uncle's land.
right? On my uncle's land. So I'm like, I don't know if he's gonna be into it. Let me float it. Well, first of all, my uncle's like, hell yeah.
Well, this is also the guy that kind of went underground when Biden became president because he's coming for everything, right?
Right.
So this guy's about it.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, back then though, I didn't really
didn't
kind of know.
So the conversation was like, "Hey, Unc, my buds are coming over, and they're bringing weapons of war.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Is that okay with you?"
And he's like,
And
yeah,
the
it
uncle's
should be
like,
fun.
fuck yeah, it's okay. Let's go.
Like, we're going to Iran tomorrow. Is that cool?
100%.
Cool.
Cool. We're fast roping it.
Yeah.
By the way. So that first year, and I remember I shot an AR, and I distinctly remember walking back through the pasture from the range back to the house, and one of my buddies who was in the Navy was explaining to me a 5.56. And he's like, yeah, he's like, you know, it's a 5.56, but it can also shoot a 2.23. And my brain is just melting because I'm like, I don't understand any of this. But
Neither did he.
no, probably not.
Based off the Navy picture that was just published, right?
There we go.
Yeah.
Shots fired. So that's where I think I caught the bug of just
Okay.
shooting. I found it was fun.
So in other words, you shot a gun for the first time and you were like, wait, this is just fun.
Yeah. Right.
This is just a good time.
Yeah.
Being
And
done
100%.
safely. This
And
is
true story, dude. Everybody I've ever taken shooting that was like anti-gun,
Nobody walks
or not
away and
necessarily
says that was
anti-gun,
terrible.
maybe even indifferent. Everybody's like, that
shit
wasn't
was
bad.
fun.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Right? That was cool. I
Yeah.
enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
you know, in a safe, like the most standoffish comment I've gotten after taking somebody shooting was, that was enjoyable in this controlled environment.
Right.
I still don't think it would be okay. Right. So
I've often
get
said that
it.
we need to host a Guns America Take a Liberal to the Range day.
Yeah.
Right? Because the reality is when you take somebody to the range, now they understand it and say, oh, that was a good time.
Yep.
That was fun. It
Yeah.
can be done safely. Surprisingly, that gun didn't just jump up and shoot anybody on its own.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So anyways,
Yeah.
My guns have never assaulted anyone.
No. So I go home after that event. I start looking into it. I think the first thing.
Palmetto State Armory. No, I'm sorry. GunsAmerica.com.
Exactly. No, I think it was, and we were talking about this. The best pistol for your concealed carry was probably one of my first
Yep.
First Googles?
First Googles. So from there,
and somehow you landed on Smith & Wesson MSP.
oh, okay.
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Look,
Yeah.
I'm migrating to SIG. So
And the Glock guy exits.
exit stage left. So
my first
that kind of evolved into. It kind of evolved to like, okay, this is a cool hobby. This is fun.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'll carry a pistol. And then my buddies who had been shielding me from all this, again, my fraternity brothers who were in there, they're like, hey, man, do you want to build a rifle? I'm like, wait, what?
Wait,
They're
I
like,
can do that?
Yeah. They're like, yeah, come over. So I went over and a couple of my buddies, it's like a build party. We sat around, a bunch of guys brought gun parts because one of my buddies had all the tools. And so everyone bring them over, we drink a bunch of beer, and he would just build rifles. Well,
like a good
fast
time.
forward the next year.
Why aren't we throwing those parties?
Right?
The next year, I show up with more rifles than any of the other guys.
At the second
Second annual Guys and Guns. And they're like,
Well, so-
wait a minute, what happened?
And so there's a few ways questions I have,
So,
but I'll also
so
mention
Unc,
that.
so Unc,
Yeah.
they're not just friends anymore. We've started a militia.
I think it's more of a cult, but yeah, I mean,
You're 3 or 4 because comms come into it.
right.
Exactly.
And so that was 5 years ago, 6 years ago?
about 5 or 6 years
And so then this year, Mike takes me to Guys and Guns.
Yep.
Okay. Now, mind you, Mike showed up the next year after this with more guns than everybody else.
Right.
So then Mike invites me to Guys and Guns, and I hear Guys and Guns. It's a camp out, and we're going to be shooting guns.
Yep.
So, Andy, what do you think I do? I take 18 guns with me,
Chris
right?
rolls
I
deep.
take 18 guns. I take several cases of Tannerite. I take a 50 cal. Like, I'm there to do we're shooting.
Yeah.
To me, we're going to shoot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? When I get there, I realize really what this is guys around a bonfire drinking beer, and every now and again they want to shoot around. So they were highly shocked when there were 6-foot tables, three of them on
Multiple.
end with guns coming down. And at one point on this Saturday morning, the day that we're going to be shooting, people are milling around campfires and whatever, and I'm awake. I'm like, we're going shooting. Where's the range?
Tacked up.
So I go to find the
Pistol
range.
belt.
I go set it up. I'm getting going. And then nobody's kind of coming down at all. So Mike and I just start shooting. And we're hearing drilling plates. And all of a sudden you see all the guys coming over the hill walking, right? And they walk down. And they were all shocked to see the amount of guns there. And I was shocked to see that they might have brought one gun.
Yeah.
I just thought I was on par.
Well,
So-
it was funny because it was almost like the breakfast bell. Because you hear a couple rounds pop off and you hear them hit that
When
plates,
I
and then
straight-
you see the guys just just slowly like zombies, like
Well, yeah,
come
and
over the
I
edge
straight
and
went out and drilled 20 rounds on a plate.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 and here they come.
Yeah. So funny story. So we do annual church retreat every year, and we have a range at the church, and they were like, hey, we're gonna have a range day for whoever wants to go out and shoot. And I did the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, it's a range day.
Yeah.
I took like 11 guns, and then you're like, oh,
That's not what
y'all,
this is.
y'all brought one? Like,
You're like, I'm a little.
and most people just bring their barbecue gun,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which doesn't ever really get
Yeah.
shot. It just sits in the holster.
like, oh.
A lot like your carry gun.
Oh,
We'll leave that.
Okay, so here, though, I'm going to make you feel like 1,000 times better.
Okay.
So as a combat vet, as a guy again, for me, really having personal protection firearms in my collection, in my possession, wasn't really a thing even after I got out of the military. I had all my hunting rifles, I had duck guns, like that stuff, right? Like what practical I'm going to use, really and truly, dude, I wasn't thinking about carrying every day when I first got out. My first carry gun, it was a Taurus.
yeah.
So, and
Look,
then I
here's
met a
the
guy
deal.
though. Now Taurus has come a long way from when I owned one, but I had a guy tell me, he goes, are you really going to trust your life to a Taurus?
So I personally wouldn't, but Mike and I had this conversation this morning. You know what? A Taurus is a lower priced gun. And I personally wouldn't trust my life to it. But you know what? I would rather somebody that can afford a Taurus carry that than nothing at all.
1,000%.
Yep.
Just because you can't afford a Glock doesn't mean you shouldn't carry a
Yeah,
Taurus.
but I could have spent, $50 more and gone with the Smith & Wesson, and,
Okay, wait a minute.
So, I mean, so,
You're carrying like a little shield.
So,
So right. And so then you show up with more guns.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, the question I have is, because I know a little bit about you and your background, is that you lived in Austin.
Yep.
Pretty liberal place.
Yep.
Had a lot of friends that you'd built around that.
Yep.
And most importantly around this, and when I first met you guys, this was a little bit of my concern, was your wife is a functional medicine doctor.
Oh, she's a hippie.
Well,
She's a yippie. She's a yuppie hippie.
Yeah, totally.
But she's 60-40 hippie.
Enough so that when I first met you guys, my thought was, oh, she's probably a little hip. She's not going to like what I do, right? She's not going to like what I do,
Yep,
right?
yep.
And so you now have that to contend with, that potentially your wife is not going to be down for guns. How did that go? Where was the shift there?
Well, so again, is that so again, just kind of through my journey with this, right, is it started out with just interest and hobby. It then evolved to protection of my family, and then evolved from there to really leaning into hunting, and to the point of I'm not a trophy hunter. Like I am a meat hunter. I have probably shot more animals that don't go on a wall than do. In fact, I only own like one trophy.
Did that come around? I think that came around the beginning of COVID or so, where
It
you
did.
felt a need to be self-reliant.
Yes, I was heading in that direction.
Okay.
COVID was 100% diesel onto that
Okay.
fire, onto that bonfire.
I'm a trophy hunter, but I hunt for meat as well. So, like, I'm not going to shoot even
Something
the
you're not gonna
trophy,
eat.
something I'm not going to eat.
Well, and I don't say that besmirching to trophy hunters, because again, I am also, like I said, mean, I have a Euro Axis rack that I'm very proud of, and one day we've talked about this. One day when we shoot elk, they are 100% going on the wall. And also is so it kind of evolved into this whole thing of personal accountability and providing for my family. And I think when Tanisha, when she and I had this conversation, and also is, while yes, my wife is a hippie,
She's also pretty logical.
but also remember too is that because of her health journey, she doesn't trust like Western medicine. She doesn't trust the mainstream either.
Right.
And so, while she was probably agnostic on the whole gun thing too, because again, I don't have a dog in that fight.
Right.
When she realized that this was a way for me to provide for the family and protect for the family, she was like, cool.
And I think that's unique to her and unique to y'all in general, is that she was able to kind of separate kind of the hippie beliefs, if you will, and make it a logical thing and say, well, I never thought about it like that. That makes sense, right?
Well, and
where it could have been a very uphill battle.
Well, and I think too is that I jokingly call her a hippie. I would say a better way of describing her is she is just a woman that has her own, walks to the beat of her own drum,
100%,
and also really has no qualms with being the AKA weird kid in the room, regardless of the topic.
Right.
Again, is that has no problem living in Houston, in Austin, and being the red dot in the blue circle. With a lot of those things, because even in her practice, is a lot of the things that she talks about are against maybe mainstream thinking or things like that. So
yeah, and I think that, I mean, much like you, is an indifference thing about guns specifically, right? And so now you get to a point where you understand, okay, this is about, one, it's fun. Two, I'm making sure that I'm protecting my family, that I'm not a lame duck. I'm not sitting there, right? Mm-hmm. And then also we can provide meat. Yep. In a case where the shit hits the fan and all hell breaks loose in the States here, we have a way to eat. Yeah. If you need, right?
Yeah, dude. Like, prices of beef went up. All of those prices are going up, skyrocketing, right? We all talk inflation, but like, I got a freezer full of wild game. Like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Well, and for me is that all of that too also plays into just, I would say, my own personal core values, right? So I'm an Eagle Scout, leadership is inherent in the way I pursue things. And so, not only do I want to be the leader of my family, but also like a responsible steward of my community. Okay. And so, the idea of the being prepared to help my fellow neighbor, right? And being able, whether it's just, being prepared driving down the road. I know you've spoke with other folks about, having medical kits and just gear in your vehicles to offer aid. And then also being able to protect myself and just, I'm not going to jump in front of an active shooter, which is some stranger at the local diner. And also is knowing that if I'm the only guy there, that I may have to engage.
Correct.
So
yeah, absolutely.
And I think for me is that kind of plays into that whole mindset as well of just kind of leadership, personal responsibility.
So then that makes a ton of sense. Now, did you ever deal with, through your journey of being indifferent on guns, not really into it, and then now obviously very into it? Did you run into other people and family or maybe friends that just did not love that you were into guns? And how did any of those interactions go? Do you have any negative interactions in that sense?
I wouldn't say I've had any negative I think I'm very fortunate that at least my small circle of friends and family, I've always kind of done my own thing within my family. I do have some very successful family members that are from the West Coast and from California and are definitely very
special friends,
very, very liberal.
Yeah.
And fortunately, though, is they've never tried to impose their will. It's always just been, if that makes you happy, then I'm happy for you. And also is I try to be. I also realize that my job in life is not to convince everybody that my thinking is the way that it should be. I just try and live my life and do what's best for myself and my family. And, there's some hills I'm willing to die on. Convincing someone else that a firearm isn't what they think it is, honestly,
well, I think there's
you just look,
crusade,
look I have found the way that you just make it all okay for anybody from California. Period. Is just tell them, look, I'm amosexual.
Yes.
Okay, that's it.
That's right.
And then they're like, okay, what are your pronouns?
What are your pronouns?
I
bang.
Shoot.
Bang is my pronoun.
Bang.
Okay.
I'll say
bang and explode.
On that.
Bang and boom.
I mean, I can't say that I ever. So I had a lot of friends, and we still do in our circles of friends, people that are very into firearms and like it. This is what we do, right? But keep in mind, just a few years into the actual industry of firearms. Yep. Prior to that, I was a 3-gun shooter. I was in and around guns. I did what I did, but I didn't work in the industry. But we did have a ton of friends that were very liberal in a sense, right? And I've seen a lot of them just be accepting of what we do, because I think that one thing that we're missing in the United States and missing in our world really is an acceptance in general. And what I mean by that is if I want somebody to be okay with the fact that I like guns and I'm going to live my life this way and do this, well, I need to also be respectful that they choose to not.
It's true.
Yeah.
Right?
It's true. Exactly.
No different than, to me, whether you are choose to be Christian and very religious, or you're agnostic or something, or atheist. Well, I'm going to each need to respect each side to have their own beliefs, right?
Right. So the other side, I mean, dude, I gladly will put the yard sign in my yard that said my neighbor does not believe in guns, so I will not protect his home. I mean, it's that simple, right? Like,
well, there you go.
No, I'm just kidding. I would never do that. But at the same time, like, I did actually see that on like Instagram or Facebook. Somebody did that.
I saw, I almost bought a yard sign for the new house that said, it looked like an ADP like symbol, but it said "fuck around and find out" security system.
Yeah, FAFU.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, but you think about this, right? And the conversation that we're having around this, like, I have liberal parents.
Yeah,
like I have very liberal parents, and they were anti-gun.
My mom too. Yeah,
they were very anti-gun, and like my mom, I remember my mom, you don't need all those guns. You don't need all those guns, and my parents have both shot now. Like, they have guns in their home now. Like, again, it's just taking away the negative stigma behind what the media has said or what we've been conditioned to believe, and really understanding, like, dude, they're tools. That's all they
so
are.
to me, I think it comes down to a core tenet of my life, and that I expect out of everybody is personal responsibility.
Absolutely.
We all have a personal responsibility for our situation and what we're doing, and not relying on somebody else, right? And I also, look, my mom, very liberal. Me and mom do not agree on a lot of things politically, right? And for a lot of reasons, and that's okay. We can still be great, close. We can still all of that. I will tell you, when there was a period where my wife and I were off sailing in the Caribbean. My mom called me one day, and I answer on the sat phone, and she says, "Hey, can you help me get a firearm?" And I was like, "What? Who are you? Is this my mother?
Prank caller.
Is this my mother? Who actually is this, right?" And so I said, "Yeah, what's going on?" She said, "I really feel like I for the first time in my life, I feel unsafe." I feel like I should have a way to protect. And so I wasn't anywhere that I could help her at the point, right? I'm off on a boat somewhere screwing off. And so I called a good friend of mine, Ron, not Ron Holmes, another friend of mine, a guy that I respect a ton. And I said, "Hey, Ron," I said, "I know you're an FFL. Can you help my mom get what she needs?" And he said, "Well, what do you want?" And I said, "Well, I think this pistol or this, I recommend, I think a P365. And I said, and he said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I said, "Ron, can you do me one more favor?" I said, "My mom has no idea. She's shot, but it's been many, many years. She doesn't know." I said, "Can you teach my mom to shoot? Can you take her?" And he was like, "Absolutely," right? Absolutely. Now, Ron looks like every operator you've ever seen. He looks like every SEAL you've ever, you like what a SEAL you expect. My mom is a liberal lesbian lady who does not look like any of that. And so it turns out
they were the odd couple.
Well, so so Ron orders the firearm, transfers it to my mom, does everything up and up there, and then they schedule a day to go to the range. Okay, so Ron's going to teach my mom, and Ron calls me and says, "Hey, I'm going to take your mom to the range," and I was like, "Cool, okay, that's awesome, Ron. Thank you so much." And so Mom wears a lot of shirts and stuff. Like, Mom's clearly a Biden fan, and so Mom wore to the range a Biden shirt. And Ron wore something else that was like the opposite of it. So this had to be the best scene ever.
Dude.
But what was cool about it, right, was that while they have vastly different political views, they had respect for each other. They could show up. Ron, I mean, I love Ron. Ron's always been there for me and vice versa. And so he was there for my mom the same he'd be there for me, right? And they had a great time because they're both humorous. They're funny as fuck people.
Right. And I think that goes back to your point of personal responsibility. When you start to understand that from a human nature, politics ceases
Doesn't matter.
to mold and shape your view towards your personal responsibility.
Well, and what I'd like to also, I think, and this may be an unpopular opinion, but I think when we think about political stuff, and we should probably shift from this in a minute, but I think that everybody needs to understand that whether it's the far left or the far right, at the end of the day, most of the time they want to get to the same place, but the disagreement is how you're going to get there. Like everybody agrees that people need to be taken care of.
Yeah.
That you need to be good to humans to each other, right?
Yeah.
But how you're going to get there, that middle section is what they're busy arguing about.
Yep.
And really, they're not arguing, they're just screaming at each other, which means nobody's listening.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and to maybe dovetail off of that to offer a little bit less political slant, but maybe just someone who, if I were a leader in the in the US and I was trying to figure out, okay, how can I find a happy middle ground? I would talk to people like me.
Yeah.
Right? Because the reality of it is you've got guys that like yourselves that have kind of come up in that. You've also got people on the other side that have just always been, anti-gun. It's talk to the people like what made you like have this conversation with those people?
Yeah.
As a numbers guy, I'd be curious to say, okay, how many people in our society now have shifted either to guns or even away from them because of just the climate we live in?
Yeah.
Because it's so
conversation
divisive
to have, right?
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that we see trend in the industry is like when the government tells you shouldn't own this gun, everybody goes out and starts buying that gun, right? And just kind of like a kid, we're like a bunch of children, right? Like, no, you can't do that. I'm gonna go do that.
Oh yeah, totally.
But that's just the American way.
Well, the first way to get a guy to do anything is to say, you can't do it.
Yeah,
exactly. You can't do that, Michael.
Exactly.
Michael's gonna jump off that cliff right there.
Hold my beer.
Right. No, exactly. Right. So, but then when you're in Texas, it's not a big deal, right? Texas, we have more guns than people.
Yep.
In the state, that's a fact. So when we look at these things, right, going back to exactly your position, you're a neutral force that looked at a situation and you said, politics aside, you looked at that and you said, because I look at politics and I'm like, man, it's different sides, same coin, right? Different sides, same coin. You said, I'm going to put this on the back burner. What is my personal responsibility, right? And you're like, it's X. And you said, now how do I move in motion towards doing this?
That's right.
Right. And again, it goes back to things that we've talked about on the show before, right? You're like, okay, now you don't just buy a firearm. You do exactly what you did, what Ron and your mom did. Now you got to go and shoot the gun.
Yeah.
Right. You got to train.
If you're not training with it, it's pointless.
Yeah. Well, the conversation we had with Ron on the show before this, you got to be prepared. You got to have a plan.
Yeah.
Right. How do I use that gun? Right. Two other episodes. When do I use that gun? Right. So it's not just, and maybe there are a select few people that just go and buy a gun on a whim. I've never met somebody that's done that without careful research and consideration.
I feel like there's always going to be some sort of an event horizon that forces
Right.
that matrix. Yeah.
So like for me, the personal, like when I bought the Taurus, right? Like for me, it was like, kind of goes back with you. Like my oldest daughter was born and I was like, man, my wife and I were talking, we're like, we got to keep this person alive. Like it's a human being. And and that doesn't mean just feeding and nurturing it. Now I'm responsible to protect it.
You decided to do it 3 more times after that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. We got 4
Once
of those
was enough
babies.
for me.
Yeah. We got 4. We got 4, baby. We're rocking and rolling.
Yeah. You're good at that.
And now I'm looking at it, dude. Now it's like, man, all 4 of my kids, I have 3 daughters and a son. All 4 of them can handle their own. They're all, they all actually, we're going to be wrestling at the state tournament in a couple weeks.
That's amazing,
they're
man.
all wrestlers.
That's
like
awesome.
I am not worried about, I watch my girls wrestle boys. And I'm going to tell you right now, those of y'all watching, I'll tell you guys, like as a dad, it's very hard to watch your daughter stand toe to toe with a boy. Like that was rough. Like
there's always something in sports. Now this is a little bit different, and that's got to be tough.
Yeah.
For me, that event and watching my kid in sports was seeing my son's a pitcher.
Yeah.
And seeing him on the mound, he's really good at loading the bases with 1 out.
Yeah.
It is super stressful to see your kid have to get himself out of that situation, right?
Yeah. But like for me, I'm like, dude, that little boy's about to put his hands on my little girl.
Oh
like,
yeah, you want to handle it.
Like we're about to have issues.
Yeah.
But then like my youngest, like I watched that boy, like he came up and he threw his hands up. She slapped him away, grabbed him and slammed him. And I was like,
You're like, get it.
Then I was like, go.
Yes.
Like we have a video of her first slam and like my son's off on one corner of the mat watching. And my daughter's like right here by the video camera. Like my oldest.
I hope she's like got him in the air.
So she did. She like turned him and slammed him. And my oldest daughter, like you watch her jump in front of the camera. Yeah. And my son, you can see on the other end of the mat going, yes. And I'm like, and as a dad, I'm like, sweet.
Exactly.
That's hilarious.
My oldest daughter's getting a little bit of cauliflower ear. And my wife's like, no. And I'm like, no, let it. Like, just like the whole thing. I want guys to look at her ears and be like, no, I'm not going to mess with it.
Yeah, exactly. Nope.
That's hilarious. So I
what gun?
Yeah, what gun?
Boom.
Who needs a gun?
Suplex.
That's right.
So,
I mean, we kind of need to wrap up this conversation. But the question I would ask, I guess, for you, Michael, is going from the lack of interest, just no indifference to being all in. If there's people kind of on the fence that happen to be listening, what's some advice you'd give them? What's a path maybe that you'd say that is easy for them to try it out and whatever.
Let me add to your question too, because I want you
please.
to answer this in that. What made this fun? At what point did you say, man, this is also fun?
Yeah. So part of that, I would say first is really try to step outside of kind of what you feel, because we're influenced every day so much. All right. Unfortunately, we live in a very divisive culture right now. So I would say really kind of step outside of that and just really understand and ask yourself, what's important to me? What am I hoping to achieve from this? Again, for me is that it was really just, it started out as just, this is really freaking cool. Yeah. And shooting guns is fun, and it's not as scary.
And you liked the building.
Well, exactly. Well, and
you still do that, which we talked about.
I mean, I own more rifles that I've built than I've actually bought fully assembled. Right. So I would say really kind of do that, and then try and find someone that, because I feel like anyone who owns guns or has firearms, it's going to be open and receptive to, hey man, I'm curious about this. When you go to the range, let me roll with you.
We all want a range, buddy.
100%. Exactly. So I would say that piece of it is just take that first step. Okay. And then to your point is, I think the fun of it all is, for me personally, is I'm a gear guy. I nerd out about gear and things like that. And so, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm moving to the SIGs, because of the whole modulation and the fire control unit, kind of building it all. It's also why I love ARs, because I build them and I can make them my own. So for me, that's kind of what's been fun about it.
You can mod Glocks too, right?
I'm learning that. I'm learning that. Yes. And then for me, is that it then goes into hunting and understanding strategies around that. I live in Texas, and so I don't really, truth be told, I don't enjoy hunting in Texas, because most of deer hunting in Texas is sitting over a feeder. I'm much more of kind of a spot and stock, kind of fair chase guy. So it's why I enjoy, Colorado, stuff like that. So for me, is I've found, I kind of fell into that as being a hobby and an interest for me. Yep. For some folks, that may not be it. It may just be simply like, hey, I feel obligated to care for my friends and those close to me. And in that instance, it may not be as large of a component of their life as maybe the three of us, and it still should be important to them in that instance.
I think for sure, and piggybacking on conversation we've had recently with Ron Holmes and preparedness, right, is just making sure that, to me, it's a way to protect those around me, take some responsibility. Yeah. Hunting, I'm interested in. I haven't done a lot of it, but I want to,
Me either.
Yeah, you not at all. You the most, right? But it goes back to our personal responsibility, taking care of those around us, and ultimately ourselves, I think we can all agree on.
Yeah, dude.
But for those of you that may not be interested in firearms, that may think this is a scary thing, understand that really any of your friends that are into guns, if you trust this friend as somebody that you would normally hang out with, probably a good person to take you to the range, right?
Absolutely.
And go shoot one for the first time. And guys, if you're going to take a friend that's never shot before, don't put him on a 50 cal Desert Eagle to start.
Or a 45 pistol, or even a
45. Let's be kind to our friends that have never shot. Yeah. Hand them a 22 if you can, or at the most a 9mm or something, absolutely, right? And help people to have a good experience, because then they're going to look at it and say, hey, this was a really great time.
So I actually met with a couple of guys yesterday that I called you about. We're going to do a Father's Day range day. Father-son thing going on out there, and I took these guys, we went to lunch and we were talking, and they said, what should we bring, or what can we shoot? And I said, man, I would say if we're going with intermediate to novice style shooters, I said, we'll shoot 9mm and 5.56s all day. I said, we're not gonna go ham. I said, all of these are controllable, and we can have some fun, right? So, I mean, I think I would say, like, going back to kind of Ron's conversation, something I've heard Ron say before, and just kind of in this, like, if you're thinking about buying a firearm, if you buy one, train smart, train safe, train often.
That's right.
Right. I mean, it's really that simple. If you're going to own a firearm, do those things. Train smart, train safe, train often.
Yep. The more you do something, the more it becomes second nature, becomes muscle memory. And that's what we're trying to do, right? And so we need to close it out for today.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
It was
Michael.
fun.
Appreciate your perspective, bro.
Yeah, this was really wonderful. So again, Chris Linville with Vulcan Arms and Guns America. If you need waterproof cases for your firearms, dustproof cases, also quick draws cleaning products, you can check out vulcanarms.com. Then, of course, if you need anything, the show is also brought to you by Guns America. You can buy any firearm accessory, optics you want there. So thank you again for spending time. We know your time is valuable, and appreciate you. Andy?
Peace. Appreciate you guys.
Bye, guys.
Great.